Greetings, Earthlings! Welcome back to 7th Street, and welcome back to another Top 5 episode. Now, recently, my newest patron subscriber, Harold Webb, shout out, man, pledged the maximum amount on my Patreon page, and of course that means he got to pick the topic of the next Top 5 episode. Now, this was a really interesting one because this is a video that I've thought about doing for quite some time now, but really didn't know what direction I wanted to go with it. Harold requested that I do a top 5 DVDs or just movies in general that are in desperate need of a re-release, like a Blu-ray or just some sort of update. Now, when I say I didn't know which direction I wanted to go with it, I mean that there are so many out there, and there are big, obvious movies that need a re-release. There are some movies that have been re-released but were very limited, like through Vinegar Syndrome or some of the other companies that have maybe gone out of business, or the re-release is just sort of discontinued. So there are big, obvious ones, but kind of a direction I wanted to go here were some movies that don't really come to mind right away, maybe. These are maybe some more underrated movies that really need a re-release, but there might not be like the support behind that. There might not be a lot of vocalization for a release, a new release of these movies. So I thought maybe it would be fun to take a look at some underrated titles and find some that don't really come to mind, but would be really cool. I know that almost everyone would like a really nice Arrow Severin Blu-ray of some of these movies. Without further ado, let's check it out. My top 5 movies that are in desperate need of a re-release. All right, number 5 on this list comes from one of my favorite directors of all time, Lucio Fulci. Sort of. Now we'll get into that in a second. I do plan on doing a reference this film of this movie, so I'm not going to get super into it. But the first one on this list is the Fulci-produced Hansel and Gretel movie. Now, it says that he's just the producer on it. There were a number of films that he produced for Italian television, but this one in particular, I wonder how much he was actually the producer and how much influence he actually had on the overall product, because this feels identical to a lot of Fulci's later period TV films, and it's got a lot of really typical Fulci elements, what with supernatural children and some of the dream logic in it, even the way that some of the ghosts are depicted and some of their abilities really remind me of films like House of Clocks, or gosh, even just some of his much later ones, Voices from Beyond. This sort of has a Voices from Beyond feel to it. Now, this movie was never actually released anywhere in the United States, and as far as I know, the only way that you can get this is a bootleg DVD that I own. I got it at at Crypticon Seattle a few years ago. It's all in Italian. I don't believe that there's a dub for it at all. You can only watch it, in its Italian language with subtitles. This is a pretty fun film and a pretty overlooked film, I think, for a lot of Fulci fans. I don't know. I think that there was a little bit of this movie that was featured in Fulci's Cat in the Brain. I think there's like a shot with eyeballs or something that makes the cut of that film. I know that a few, maybe all 3 of those movies that he produced for Italian television at this time, I think they all have a cameo in Cat in the Brain. If you guys know me at all, Cat in the Brain is not one of my more favorite Fulci films. Still a Fulci film and I love it, but I would probably rather watch Hansel and Gretel over Cat in the Brain. Yeah, this one just needs some sort of release, man, and I like dubbing. I think that goofy dubbing is fun. It's how I got into these movies as a kid and like Godzilla movies and such. So I would even be open for them to go and like dub the film and interview some of the people that have worked on it. Like I wonder where those kids are to this day. It's a pretty fun little movie, and I think that it would just be so much better to watch it like on a high def version that's just not, because like the DVD, the bootleg that I have is very muddy. I think it's also on YouTube, and it's just, this dubbed version is just, it doesn't look good. And it would be really interesting to see some of the effects and some of the, like the ghost moments like in high definition, or do like a 4K scan of it. I would be really interested in that, and I would jump on it immediately. I'm not the best about jumping on new releases. I kind of buy things at my leisure, and I like to watch things at my leisure. I also don't typically like to order movies a lot. I like to find things in the wild, which means that I miss out on a lot of things. And like I said, I just get things at my leisure, but this would be one that I would pre-order. Hansel and Gretel. I think that all of Fulci's later period TV films are in dire need of a re-release, but and all Fulci films in general should be on Blu-ray. But yeah, this one in particular I think is really fascinating. Like I said, it's got a lot of like typical Fulci elements. It has like nothing to do with the Hansel and Gretel nursery rhyme. It's really just about these two little kids named Hansel and Gretel who get kidnapped by like this rich guy who kind of has this, it's kind of like parts the Clonus horror, where it's like they take kids and harvest their organs to give to like rich people. It's got this kind of cool like class system aspect to it, which is also like really which is really prevalent in even like early Fulci films. You know, you got like Don't Torture a Duckling, and there are like similar themes going on in this movie, and it's all shot in Italy, which is just beautiful. A lot of the Italian directors in the 80s came over to the United States and started filming here, and it's really interesting to see a later period film shot in Italy. It looks beautiful. Yeah, I would be thrilled if they released this on Blu-ray. At my number 4 spot, I have The Great Alligator, another Italian film, a monster film. I believe this is from Sergio Martino. I should probably look at these things before I do these videos, but I do a lot of this shit like off the cuff. So I'm sure I'll look at this like as soon as I'm done making this video, and I'll know whether or not I've embarrassed myself. But I believe that it is Sergio Martino. Now, I know that there is a DVD release of this from Maya releasing. They also released some other Martino films, Island of the Fishmen and Scorpion with Two Tails. This one in particular, I think, needs a better release, a Blu-ray release. I think that it would do better than the other films, possibly. It's just a really like goofy monster movie starring Barbara Bach, who's married to Ringo Starr, and like I said before, I only own this one on VHS. I don't actually own the Maya DVD, because I have the other, his other movies from that company, and they're not the best releases. There's no special features, and I've kind of always expected this movie to eventually make it to Blu-ray, and it hasn't, and it sort of blows me away. It's a relatively well-known later Italian monster film. I think that it even shows up in that documentary, The 50 Worst Movies of All Time. But this is like, it's a movie I wish that I liked more than I do. There was like a lot building up for me up to seeing this movie. It's a little boring at times, but goofy monster movies are like what I grew up on. I love these movies, and I would love to see this one like in high def. This is another one that I would probably rush out and get, because like I said, whenever I watch this movie, I still watch the VHS version, because like I said, it just feels like, what's the point? I've talked about this movie a few times before. I've talked about it on 5 movies that I wish I liked more than I did. It's boring at times, but it's still like a pretty film to look at. Martino has a really nice ability to shoot nature, And I think that this one would really benefit from viewing in just a more cleaned up format. I think the muddiness of some of these like shitty DVD releases or VHS really work against some of these films, especially films like The Great Alligator that are slow in points. Like if there's not the monster on the screen and the quality of the transfer doesn't look very good, it's very easy, I think, to tune out from the movie. But like I said, this one's pretty popular. It's got Barbara Bach in it. The Great Alligator really needs a better release. I think probably everybody would agree with me on that. At my number 3 spot here, I have the Toho Kaiju classic Varan, or as it's also known in America, Varan the Unbelievable. Now, this is one of those movies that has like a really interesting history to it. Just like Godzilla 1954, Varan was re-released in the United States with additional footage, shot, adding in an American character. Myron Healy is now the protagonist of this new version that they did, and you could tell that Godzilla was really successful. So there were other companies spending very little bits amount, a really little bit of money on acquiring Japanese monster films and then reshooting it, trying to catch the same lightning in a bottle. Now, Varan was not popular in the United States, and it wasn't very popular in Japan either. I say that this is an interesting film because this is that kaiju film that kind of comes right after the first Godzilla film and its quickie sequel, and Rodan and Mothra, which were shot in color and really like took off, kind of made the Toho Kaiju boom of the late 50s into the 60s. Varan is in black and white. It's it's basically Godzilla again. It's like the same sort of storyline with these scientists who go to this island and they're studying these like butterflies that they didn't know still existed, and the locals are afraid of this monster that lives on the island named Varan, and then Varan awakens and destroys Tokyo. This, just because it's basically the same cookie cutter monster on the loose film, it just failed to catch on, really. And even the Varan kaiju is very underrated. He only shows up in one other film, which is Destroy All Monsters, and has a very brief cameo. This movie was released on DVD by Tokyo Shock, I believe, in like a 3-movie pack that's now really expensive. I think I spent over $100 on it when I got it. And it only has the Japanese cut of the film. It has no dub to it. You can only watch the Japanese version with its subtitles. Now, this movie needs to be re-released to a better format. It needs to be on Blu-ray. This is a really old DVD release as well, but they need to include the Varan the Unbelievable version with Myron Healy. They need to add some special features. This is just a movie that's just so unfairly overlooked to this day. The kaiju's overlooked. This one just needs to be out there. I think, there are better Toho films that are also in need of a re-release, but Varan just has always got lost in the mix. I think that this movie, that this kaiju sort of owed this. He deserves to be at the front of the line. I don't know how you go about acquiring these rights from Tokyo Shock or from Toho. I know they make it really hard. Toho is really stingy with their movies and with just the likeliness of their characters from their movies. So I know that it's got to be tougher than it is, or than it seems. But I think that a Blu-ray of Varan with all these features and multiple versions included, because I believe there's also a Japanese television cut that's floating around out there, I think that it would sell like hotcakes, man. I think they would make their money back if someone were to just go in and acquire the rights And, you know, I've kind of been rooting for companies like Mill Creek, who released a steelbook version of Mothra. I would love if they could get their hands on this and release an affordable steelbook version of it. I think that would be really, really cool. So yeah, man, number 3 is Varan. Number 2 on my list is going back to Fulci. I would love to see probably Severin. I think Severin is the company that's like the best equipped and does their Italian re-releases really, really well. I would love to see a House of Doom box set come out with the 2 films that Fulci made in House of Clocks and Sweet House of Horrors, and I would like to see the Lenzi duology to be included in that as well. House of Lost Souls and House of Witchcraft, both of which I have never seen. They're only released in the UK, and nowadays the DVDs are just so expensive. And like I said, you know, I'm pretty late to like the ordering movies online game. So, you know, I didn't do that back in the day when I guess they were relatively cheap, and now they go for like $120. And this sort of seems like something where, you know, it's kind of like Murder Rock. Murder Rock had a really expensive DVD that was out there from Shriek Show, I believe. And I knew that someone would re-release it on Blu-ray, so I didn't bother getting this $50 DVD. I feel the same way about the Lenzi films. I feel like they will be out sooner rather than later. But like I said, I would like to see this in a box set. I'd like to see all 4 of them all together. These were the House of Doom films that Fulci and Lenzi did for Italian television. I believe that both of Fulci's films were too graphic and they couldn't play them on TV, which is really interesting. I love both House of Clocks and Sweet House of Horrors. I plan on doing both of them as a reference this film. I think they're both very vastly underrated, especially Sweet House of Horrors. People really seem not to like that one because the fact that the main characters in it are children and they are dubbed horrifically. But they're fun movies nonetheless. Obviously, all 4 of the films have to do with like a house where a tragedy has occurred, and now there's some sort of paranormal activity going on there. Like I said, I really want to see the Lenzi versions. I hear they're not very good, but people say that about the Fulci versions, and I really enjoy these films. I'd love to see them on Blu-ray. So yeah, like I said, I think that Severin could release a really good box set of this. And my number 1 underrated movie that is in desperate need of a re-release is actually a trilogy of films, the Carnosaur trilogy. Yes, I love the Carnosaur movies. I'm a big dinosaur movie fan, and when I was a kid, I loved the Carnosaur films. I remember renting them on VHS all the goddamn time. Like the 3rd one is my favorite one in the series. There's something about like, you know, goofy dinosaur suits fighting military guys that just appeals to me. Like that's what I like to watch, like smoke some weed and order some pizza and watch those films, man. They just make for the best viewing experience. But these movies were released on VHS, like I said, and then very early on in the 2000s, there was a box set released, a trilogy that I was lucky enough to find this box set used at like some video store or something. And I remember buying all 3 of them, and like the guy like took them out of like the used box because it's kind of messed up a little bit, I guess, and he like gave them to me. I remember being like this 11-year-old kid being like, well, no, dude, I want the box too. This is like a prized possession in my collection just because I love these movies, and they're the only way that you can get them is these horrible DVD releases from the early days of DVD. And I wasn't even aware until I started like thinking of the movies that I really wanted to see get a re-release. I looked it up, and this box set is like pretty pretty hard to find. It's not super expensive because I don't think most people really care about Carnosaur, but it's a pretty hard box set to find. These movies would be fantastic on Blu-ray, dude. I would get these immediately. They can't be that expensive either. These are Roger Corman produced films. I know that Shout Factory was releasing some Roger Corman produced films like on DVD and Blu-ray, and for whatever reason they skipped over Carnosaur. And this would have been like the perfect 3-pack to go along with the Slumber Party Massacre 3-pack. It doesn't even need to be extravagant. I think that these movies just deserve not to have like the really shitty menu that offers you like nothing. There's like actor biographies and it's like some shit you have to read. Like, it's just nothing. There are no features on this. There are like no trailers on this. You basically can just watch the movie. Yeah, man, the Carnosaur films would just be great. I think they would look beautiful too because they were shot pretty well. They were made in the 90s, so you know that like the prints are still around. They're probably still in good shape. And like I said, they can't be that expensive. And, you know, killer dinosaur movies, dude. How are you gonna do better than that? So that's it, guys. That was my top 5 underrated movies that are in desperate need of a re-release. Now, like I said, this video was requested by my newest patron, Harold Webb. Once again, thank you so much, man. That means a lot to me that you're donating to 7th Street Productions. But definitely go check out our Patreon page and follow us on YouTube and Instagram, and you know, shoot me a friend request or a message or something. Of course, as always, there are more Reference This Film episodes to come. I'm doing a new podcast tomorrow, and it should be up sometime next week, so keep your eye open for that. Let me know in the comments what are some movies that you think need a good re-release, but nobody's talking about it. You know, let's do what we can to put these films out there, to get the word out there so that these companies pick it up and do a nice release of them. Until next time, guys.